Hey there. So today's post is called How Do We Compare? After we receive Jesus' forgiving and restoring grace, how quick are we to offer this grace to those around us? It's written by Sam Van Dyke. There are two things that dramatically alter our daily perspective of who we are. The first is how honest we are in comparing ourselves to God. The second is how much we focus on sin in our lives and in the lives of others. When we are dishonest with ourselves, we will overemphasize the sin of others and underemphasize our own sin. Every day, there is a mountain of rich grace in our Savior pours into our lives. Hour by hour, the beauty of God's good creation passes before us. This grace is ample testimony to a good God and his general grace toward all his creation. Much of this beauty we see every day becomes discounted as just normal part of our lives. We sort of see it so frequently we discount it. We stop seeing the wonder of the goodness of God. This is where we trade grateful worship of God with gradual dissatisfaction with his provisions. This is where we begin to be dishonest about ourselves and compared to God. Because we have so much rich provision and we fail to recognize how much goodness we receive every day, we habitually start to believe it is because of our own goodness we receive all this grace. Giving in to this ingratitude puts us on a slippery slope to having a high view of ourselves and a low view of God. When sliding down this slope of ingratitude, the sins of others appear uglier and greater. With God off his high throne and our self esteem exalted, we sit on his throne and begin to adjudicate the sins we see in those around us. Many times, the sins we focus on are in our close family members or friends. Often, those relationships are a means of much grace in our lives. These people are a reflection of the goodness that God is daily pouring into our cup, people who we should be thankful for. But because our hearts are lifted up, we discount all this goodness and hone in on their sin. The truth of the matter is that this sin is real, and so likely there is sin that needs to be addressed in someone's life, and that should be done in an appropriate way. The problem is that we measure their sin against our righteousness rather than God's righteousness. When God judges, he does so amid an ocean of grace and patience he has poured around us. Clearly, in sight of God, all sin is desperately uglier than we can ever know, but even with that view of sin, God addresses it in a loving and gentle way. A perfect example of this is the Apostle Peter after he denied that he knew Jesus 3 times. Jesus could have sternly corrected Peter when he was out on the fishing boat and told him he should be out preaching. He could have left Peter's 3 time denial up to him to work out and left the burden for him to carry alone. Jesus could have gotten right to the business of telling him the plan to preach the word and repeating how he should get back to business. This straight to the point method is what I often am prone to do. I forget and fail to consider what that person is thinking and feeling and just get right to correcting mistakes. Gratefully, Jesus kept his promise that he made to his disciples in the upper room, and he did not leave them alone, just as he promised. And it says, I will not leave you as orphans, I will come to you. He told them that in the upper room. While walking with Peter, Jesus addressed each denial and restored him 3 times, all 3 times calling him to love. This must have been enormously encouraging to Peter. The remarkable thing that happens next, after Peter felt that weight lifted from his heavy conscience, the first thing Peter wants to do is focus on John walking next to him. And so he was just freed. He was just relieved from this great burden of guilt. And now that he has this free conscience, his first thing he wants to do is talk about John. It says, Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them, the one who also had leaned back against him during the supper and had said, Lord, who is this that is going to betray you? When Peter saw him, he said to Jesus, Lord, what about this man? It is remarkable how even in the presence of Jesus, even as the chosen leader by Jesus to shepherd the sheep, Peter still was comparing himself to John. You would think Peter really blew it here. Jesus was done with this self-focused man, but not Jesus. The final words that Jesus left Peter with in this conversation was, Jesus said to him, if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me. In the previous 3 years, Peter had seen every proof he needed confirming that Jesus was King of Kings and God, very God. There are 8 signs John recorded. This, along with Jesus' own resurrection from the dead, should have left Peter with ample motivation to proclaim to the world the risen Christ. The lesson that Peter was learning was that the most powerful testimony to the lost world was not the signs and wonders, though Peter did perform signs and wonders. As Jesus purified Peter, gently restoring him to follow him, so Peter was learning the lesson that he needed to follow that same example. That is what Jesus meant to feed his sheep. There was plenty of truth that needed to be proclaimed, but at the heart of all that truth was the profound grace that Jesus showed to this stubborn fisherman. The cleansing Jesus offers can and should be preached, but so too must it be lived out by example. Peter decades later wrote, "Having purified your souls by your obedience to the truth for a sincere brotherly love, love one another earnestly from a pure heart." When filled with pride, we compare ourselves with God and we think we are not that bad. Then, in that exalted position, we sit on the judgment seat of God to cast judgment on others, instead of pointing out our finger at one another. Just as Jesus called Peter to follow him, so, too, may we walk in love as Christ loved us. And walk in love as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us, a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. Ephesians 5:2. Thank you. I'll see you next week.